Hi everybody, I'm Jack. I'm an instructor in guitars for vets, and we are doing a project that is working out of the best music theory book for beginners. There you see it? Okay. I don't see the fellow who wrote its name on here. Dan Spencer. Okay. So, I'm going to start talking about this chapter. Harmony 1, Triads. Okay. There's a couple of things. This fellow says that a chord is harmony. Harmony makes chords. Chords are a way of giving names to and describing the quality of different harmonies. And then he goes on to say that there are different schools of thought on how to categorize harmonic intervals. As he says, any two notes sounded at the same time are an interval, true. But then he says they are not a chord, in parentheses, in brackets, debatable. Well, yeah, it's debatable, especially after you hear the next line. Any two notes sounded at the same time can be classified as an interval and as a dyad, which is a type of chord. Triads and chords definitely convey feeling, emotion, and meaning, as he says. And there's an argument that if you have only two notes, that it's not complex enough to give you those feelings of emotion or implying some kind of meaning. That's not an argument, and you could talk about that all day. Okay, triads, he says, are three-note chords that are created with particular intervals. Not all three-note chords are triads. Absolutely true. It's sort of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square, if you know what I mean. Okay, the chord tones are the notes that are in a chord. He then says chord tones have names, just like scale degrees, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so as all of this applies to guitar, the book is general theory, but we need to apply it to guitar. If you start on the most simple major scale, it's C major, has no sharps, no flats, it's all natural. So the distance between this fret and this fret may be 2 frets, but it's actually a whole step. The distance from here to here is 1 fret, but it's called a half step. Okay, so again, the distance, which is a major second, from C to D is 2 frets. Okay, now the distance from D to E is also 2 frets, and that is a major second. So in a triad, the important notes are the root, the third, and the fifth. So the root here is C, the third is E, and even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4 frets away, it's actually 2 whole steps away. So from C to D, whole step, D to E, whole step. Okay, now to get to the fifth, we have to continue up the neck. Now this is done for explanation purposes only. This is not the way you would play the triad or a major scale. I'm doing it this way just for clarity. So to get to the fifth, which is the G note, from the E, it's 1, 2, 3 more half steps up. But from the C note, which is the root, it's 1, 2, a half step, and another whole step. So to get to the fifth of the triad, you have to go 1 whole step, 2 whole steps, a half step, and a whole step. So the notes are C, E, G. And if you were to play them simultaneously as a triad, it would sound like this. Okay, now if we were going to play minor triad, the root note is still C, but the third is flatted, which just means rather than going up 2 whole steps, we're going to go up a whole step and a half step. So it's 3 frets away instead of 4 frets away. So again, the distance between the root and the flatted third is 1.5 whole steps. The fifth remains the same. There's no change. But the distance now between the flatted third and the fifth is 2 whole steps. Watch, because here's the flatted third. We got to go 2 frets up, that's a whole step, and then 2 frets up, that's another whole step. So you have your C, E flat, which is the flatted third, and G, which is still the fifth, or the perfect fifth, as they call it. And what that'll sound like is this. So generally people call this the sad chord minor, and the happy chord would be major. Minor, minor, major. And it would really help you in your guitar playing if you learn to hear the difference between the two. Okay, moving on. He wants to talk about how to understand major and minor triad names. Okay, well, triads are named after the root note of the triad. So just before we were talking about C major and C minor triad, and it's named after the root note, which is C. Very simple. Okay, if you see the letter C on a page of chords, it's implied C major. Okay, if you see a C with a little dash after it, it's implied as C minor. C minor can also be written as C, capital C, with small letters M-I-N. Okay, but there's no need to say major after a capital letter. It's implied that it's major. Okay, so if you wanted to hear what the triads sound like, if you start from C, and I'm just playing triads, 3 notes at a time. The first one in the key of C is C major. The second one is D minor. And if you've never seen D minor played like this, I'm playing it this way so that it stacks exactly the same, in the same order for all the chords. So it sounds like the E minor is the third, the number 3 chord. F is the 4th chord. G is the 5th chord. A minor is the 6th chord. And B diminished is the 7th chord. And now you're back to the top. Okay, let's discuss how to write triads, page 115 of the book. This information that he's giving us is strictly for its textbook. The real world doesn't function this way, at least the human part of the real world. So yeah, you could review this. It's self-explanatory. But these rules really only exist in the world of musical calligraphers who are actually penning the music or software. But the average person doesn't pay attention to these rules. They just write it, and again, if they have to pass the music along, everybody understands it. However, I think what he's trying to say down here, let me bring that up a little further. Okay, to build an A minor triad, I think I already discussed this in the guitar part, but here it is in the non-guitar area, but it's the same rules. To build an A minor triad, you start off with the A note sitting in the second space up. There's a minor third between the first note and the second note. And then you add the fifth above the A, which is the E note, perfect fifth, that sits in the top space. So it's a perfect fifth away from A, but it's a major third above the C note. Okay, this is the same. This looks the same to me. Anyway, this is just the same thing rewritten as a half note. Over here you have exactly the same thing, building a major triad. You have your root, which is C, and then you add this E above that, which is on the first ledger line, not on it, but in it, or it crosses right through the note. The E is a major third above C, and then you add the G, which is a perfect fifth above C, and a minus third above E. So the differences here between major and minor, between the root and the second note of the triad, on a minor triad, there's a minor third between the first note and the second note. On a major triad, there's a major third between the root note and the next note above it. Okay, and this over here again is just the same triad with shown as a half note. Okay, so what's happening here is exactly the same as we discussed in the page before, except he's showing you how to do it with key signature. And the rules here apply just the way they did previously for the C major. All major scales have the same layout. It's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's the rule. So in order to make this triad and the key work, you have to add the sharp, because the distance between G and A, if you're going up the scale, is a whole step. Between A and B is a whole step. B and C is a half step. C and D is a whole step. D and E is a whole step. And then the distance between the E and the F, the F has to be made sharp in order to get the rule to work. So you have a whole step between E and F, becomes F sharp, and then you have your half step between F sharp and G. Okay, so the triad is set up with your root note. You indicate the one sharp for the key signature. Then you put the major third above it, which is B. Then you add the fifth above the root note, which happens to be a minor third above the B, but a perfect fifth above the G. And this is just the same thing shown as a half note rather than a whole note. Now here you have the same thing in E minor, which is the relative minor of G major, so it has one sharp. And the rule for that, E minor natural scale is whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Okay, so how does that work out? You got to have an F sharp because the first step up is a whole step. So E goes to F, then you got to make the F a sharp so that you get a whole step. Then the next one is a half step, F sharp to G. The step after that is a whole step, that's G to A. Whole step after that, A to B. Half step after that, B to C. Whole step after that, C to D. And a whole step after that, D to E. So again, here's the way it's built, and this is just an example of what it looks like as in E minor, in an E minor triad with a half note designation. All right, dotted note triads. Everything is the same except he's just explaining to you where you put the dot. And again, the rules are the rules, but if you were writing this on paper, nobody cares. They get the idea. It's dotted, it's dotted. Okay, ties. Again, good rules to follow, but not necessary. Okay. Triads, the major scale harmonized to the fifth. Alrighty, so here you have a C major scale, what he's calling it, harmonizing it to the fifth, where the fifth is the highest note of each chord. Okay, so he's laying it out that the first one is C major, the next one is D minor, and it's spelled out as D, F, and A. The next one is E minor, that's the third step. It's laid out as E, G, and B. F major is laid out as F, A, and C. G major is laid out as G, B, and D. And A minor is A, C, E. For some strange reason, he leaves out the seventh step, but I will tell you what it is. It's diminished, and it's the next step up would be B, D, and F, where you have B to D is a minor third and D to F is a minor third. And it's also a flat fifth, a flat five above the B note. New major and minor triads. And I've already discussed with you the distances between the notes. So I'm going to pass that up. Alright, this is just the G major example, harmonized to the fifth, which is the same discussion as C major. The rules are all the same. Okay, I find this kind of repetitive, but this is basically the same thing. You've already discussed the distances between the notes for major and minor. Okay, so here he wants you to build a B minor triad. If you follow the rules, you know from B to C sharp is a full step. And you know it's got to be C sharp because it can't be C. C is just a half step. Sorry. So B to C sharp is your first interval, a whole interval. And we know that the rule says that the third has to be a minor third above the root. So that would make a whole step and a half step, because we already have the whole step. So the half step above C sharp is D. So that's you pen down D. That's your next note in the triad. Now we also know the other rule, that the third note of the triad is got to be a fifth or a perfect fifth above the root. Or it could be a major third above the second note in the triad. So if you look at it that way, from D to E is a whole step, and from E to F is a half step, so that doesn't work. It's got to be a whole step if you look at the rules. So it's D to E to F sharp, that's your major third. And it's also, the F sharp is also a perfect fifth above B. So B to C sharp is your first step, whole, and the next step is D, that's your half, and then comes two whole steps, D to E, E to F sharp. So F sharp is your next note. And this works for every single root note that there is in the 12 notes that we use in Western music. Okay, Major scales harmonized to the fifth we've already gone over, but here he's introducing Roman numerals. Roman numerals can be very helpful, absolutely, because you can then communicate to other people you're playing with what chord you want them to go to. This is all self-explanatory. I don't see that I have to go any further here. He's also telling you now that here's your major layout. C, D, E, F, G, A, and again, for some reason, they're leaving out the next step up, which would be a B diminished. This is your 2 chord, which is indicated over here as a minor. This is your 3 chord, which is indicated as a minor. And your 6 chord is indicated as a minor. But beyond that, there should be diminished, which would be B diminished, which is made up of B, D, and F. So 1, 4, 5 is a very common chord progression. But here you see how it's made up: the 1, the 4, and the 5. They're all major and all indicated with the uppercase Roman numerals. And here it is all together. Okay, over here, this is the degree, the scale degree, its position in the scale. The quality of the chord itself. The 1 chord is major. The number 2 spot is minor, and this is the key of C major. So this is a D minor. The number 2 spot, number 3 spot is E minor. Indicated by 3 lowercase i's. The 4 spot is major, it's an F, and it uppercase Roman numerals. G is the 5 chord, it's major, and 6 is the minor. There should be a diminished over here. It should be a B with a little circle after it, means B diminished. All right, key of G major, everything exactly the same for each scale step, scale degree. All right, over here, he's just indicating right the treble clef, the double bar line, and the major scale up to the 6th degree. So here you have G, A, B, C, D, E. And you know, according to the rules, it has to be G, A minor, B minor, C, D, and E. Then you add, as he says, the snowman. And after you're done with that, then you're going to indicate the accidentals. Over here, let me scroll down a little bit. You have to remember, and this is something that I haven't seen yet in the book, maybe I missed it, but if you see a key signature like this, F sharp, that means until notified otherwise, every F in the entire song is F sharp. Okay? That's the rule. Now, you may have an accidental along the way that says, no, the composer wants an F over here, in which case it'll be indicated with a natural sign. Or maybe there'll be a change of key, but it will be indicated in the musical chart. And so again, if you see an accidental at the beginning of a piece, it means that every single one of those notes indicated, in this case it's an F sharp, so every F in the piece has to be F sharp. Okay, over here he's just telling you, rather than writing in the accidentals, as you see here, they're incorporated into the key signature. So nothing else needs to be said. Wherever there's an F, it has to be F sharp. Okay, over here, it's pretty simple. Musicians, he says, talk about Roman numerals. So if you're in the key of C, they might say, let's play the 4 chord. You know automatically that that's F. Comes from experience, memorization, etc. The 5 of the tonic, so the tonic would be C, and the 5 is G. The 2 of the root would be D minor, as he indicates. We already know that in the key of C. And these ways of describing a chord get everyone to understand, what they're talking about. Exactly. If you know the tonic of the key scale is G, you instantly know that the 2 is A minor and 3 is minor and so on. Okay, makes total sense. Okay, so this is pretty much like the major scale explanation, except he's talking about minor. And you just have to pay attention to the rules. Okay, so now he's discussing the minor scales harmonized to the 5th. Pretty much very similar to the major discussion. Scale degree number 1 is your A minor, obviously. Chord symbol indicated with the dash. Okay, now chord number 2 should be diminished. And again, I don't know why he leaves it out. That would consist of B, D, and F. Okay, and it should be indicated by B with a little, capital B with a little circle next to it. The third step is major. And even though it's indicated by flat 3, that's the scale degree. That's not the chord quality. It's a major chord that exists at the flatted 3rd degree. Okay. The next step is D minor, E minor, F is major, and G is major. It all falls according to the rules. Okay. Now 1 and 8 are just a repeat of 1. Okay, here's E natural minor. Again, same thing, E minor, stacked up, following the rules, E, G, and B. Okay, so for the second step, it would be F sharp diminished, which would be F sharp, A, and C. It's a stack of minor thirds. So this would be indicated as F sharp with a little circle next to it. And everything else is exactly the same, just in the key of E minor. Okay, so over here, what he's talking about is how to find the relative minor. It's actually pretty simple. What he's talking about is taking the 6th and 7th steps, breaking them off, inserting them in front of the root note for the major, and then you end up with a pattern theoretically that's 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, but it then becomes A becomes the number 1. A is the tonic. This is an A minor scale. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty easy. But another easy way to do it is to take, let me get back over here. If you just take the root note and you count down 1.5 steps, that's the natural minor. So from C, a half step down is B, and 1 step down from there is A. That's 1.5 steps. So the relative minor of C is A minor. Okay? This is pretty self-explanatory. It's just telling you that the relative harmonized scales share the same chords because they share the same notes. Yeah. All right, so an example of that is C major and A natural minor. They share the same chords, they're just in different positions. In C major, the 6th chord is A minor, and in A minor, the 3 chord is C major. Same thing holds true for G and E natural minor. And the same thing will hold true for any major and relative minor key. Okay. So what he's trying to do here is show you how to construct this using his methodology. So what he's telling you to do is to take the 6th step, break it off and insert it in front of the first step of the major. So in this case, it doesn't matter what case, all cases are the same. So again, this should be, the 7 should be there over here, the 7 should be here. Okay, so over here he's just saying you should renumber the scale degrees because you've cut the 6 and 7 off here and put it in front of 1. 1 now becomes 3, and the 6 becomes 1, and the 7 becomes 2. So here it is completely inserted, and here it is the way it should be set up, because A minor, or the minor of this major key, now becomes 1. Okay, this over here, he's just making a statement of fact that the C major and the A natural minor have the same chords. The same holds true for any pair of chords that are in a relationship, such as major and relative minor. We've already discussed this in the major scales. It's just indicating how to write your Roman numerals as uppercase and lowercase. Okay, again, he's showing you what the 1 chord is, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord in minor key. If you remember, in the major key, the 1 was major, the 4 was major, and the 5 was major. So over here, he's just showing you which chords in the minor scale are major chords. So it's the 3rd one, the 6th one, and the 7th one. And here he's put it all together. And again, this should be F sharp, A, and C over here, and it should be listed as number 2 in lowercase. Okay, over here he's just showing you a primary example using the actual, like a minor scale, so you could see it, but everything is the same. He chose the E minor, and again, this is supposed to be diminished. It should be a small Roman numeral 2, and this should be an F sharp with a little circle after it. A minor, again, it all follows exactly the same rules. All right, over here, he's just explaining to you, again, you start off with your notes of the scale, okay, and then you stack your snowmen, as he explains, and then you add in your accidentals. Okay, so we know that an E minor, F is sharped, so it's in 2 places. We have an F sharp here and an F sharp here, so we indicate it with the sharp sign. Now, when you come down to here, the F sharp is indicated in the key signature. So again, that tells you that everywhere in this written piece that you're reading, every F you see is sharped unless indicated otherwise. Okay, so again, these are just the scale notes, and here they are stacked up, and you only have to put a sharp over here.